Hello and welcome to the podcast, Eye of the Beholder. I am your host, Dulce Crystal Ortiz, and in today's episode, we're going to be delving into the subject of entities or attachments. Whenever you do any kind of work such as this, as hypnotherapy, it is honestly a very up in the air. We're not very sure about a lot of the topics or a lot of the points that come up. So just a little bit about myself. I am a certified clinical hypnotherapist, and I have been on this journey as a practitioner myself for about 5+ years. And I have noticed that when I was doing sessions with my clients, my main objective was to find the base of the negative programs that many people were carrying and to try to help them to sort of switch it out to where their negative programs could become positive. And when that happens, there is tremendous amount of healing and change that can occur within the body. So when I started doing sessions with my clients, at first it seemed very normal, very by the book. But when I started delving more into energetically what it was that I was sensing, at the same time working with the subconscious mind, I found that there was a lot more to be explored than what was pretty much, there's a lot more that was to be explored than what any book was ultimately teaching. So, I mean, even to this day, there's still a lot of information that we don't know because I suppose it's not explored as much as it should be. But when hypnotherapy is used, it's something that it's science-based. So there is research that has been done, but there's a limited amount of research, to be honest. But there are case studies that surgery was even performed with a patient that was under hypnosis, and it was a dental surgery. But even so, they found that the patient that was under hypnosis and had the surgery performed, they had no side effects, no negative side effects. They were able to heal much more quickly, and they were able to even, when you get to a certain level, you're able to even numb pain and stop the pain receptors from pretty much making it to your mind. So hypnotherapy, it's really interesting in how you can do so much with it. There really is no limit. As long as the mind has creation and imagination, there is no limit to what we can do. Going back also to when I first started doing hypnotherapy, I wasn't aware that these entities or attachments even existed until I started practicing more and also allowing myself to feel energetically my intuition, like allowing myself to be guided by that as well. I wasn't just working consciously, but it was sort of, the more you practice, the more you become better at it. I guess all of it sort of worked in ways to where it allowed for me to be able to tap into that part where the subconscious and the conscious mind can work together. And I noticed that one of those things that came up often and very easily, it's not only when I was doing my sessions, but outside of my sessions, I was able to also be more aware of attachments or entities, however you wish to word it. A lot of the times I would say yes, if you were to describe something as an entity, then it would be kind of considered negative because that's the kind of energy that those attachments expel. So going into a lot of these sessions with my clients, I did notice that at one point I was able to even sense whatever it was that they were physically feeling within themselves. And I mean, at first, it was kind of strange because I didn't know, I hadn't experienced this before, or maybe I have, but the thing is, I wasn't as trained with realizing what it was until doing sessions with clients. So the fascinating thing about entities is that a lot of the time, like I mentioned, they can be negative. A lot of the time, they can be considered something that causes us to sort of think or feel or react in a negative way. And, the whole idea of being careful with who it is that you surround yourself with, you do also need to be careful with what places you visit. And if you're someone who is a bit more susceptible, or we could say sensitive to energies around you, it's possible that there are some things that could attach themselves to you. The first example I want to bring up was I had this client that she was someone who was also very sensitive to her surroundings and to the people around her. But she was in the middle of her healing journey. So her, like myself, it's like we were kind of delving more into what could be happening in sort of like the spiritual realm and also in our consciousness. At one point, I remember, because I had already started working with the energy pathways of the body, along with also doing changing the subconscious programs, I noticed at one point my body would begin to feel whatever it is that her body was carrying. And it's like sometimes like words would kind of come out, would kind of come up. Sometimes, I would feel the emotions that she wasn't conscious that she was feeling, but her body was carrying. And whenever there was a physical pain, I remember she had mentioned to me that she was carrying this ache in one of her legs. And she said that she had years where she had this pain, that it would come and it would go. And, with the work that she did, the work that she had was semi-strenuous. It wasn't too bad, but it also wasn't just, sitting at an office desk all day. So it was a little bit strenuous, and she noticed that depending on her day and certain clients that she would see, that ache would sort of become more prominent. In the middle of one of our sessions, I ended up bringing my focus to that place that she mentioned was causing her a lot of ache and a lot of pain. And I mean, she also said that she went to the doctors and to get it checked out because she thought it could have possibly been something more, like maybe her calcium, bone density, something, because it had been like more than a decade that she carried this pain. And she had mentioned that there was nothing that doctors found. There was nothing in their research or their studies, the tests they did. So when I did focus on that spot, I noticed that there was just a wave of... I'm not someone who is very susceptible, I would say. I'm very good at not feeling nauseousness or sickness very easily. Like maybe in my whole life, I've maybe had like a stomach ache a handful of times. And even then, like it's not something that would cause me to be sick. Like it's very rare for me to feel sick. With her, I noticed in that session, when I did focus in that spot, it was tremendous. Just even to this day, remembering that event still kind of makes me a little nauseous. But the best way I could explain it was this entity or this attachment that had sort of attached itself to her physical form was causing that ache and that pain in her leg, which caused for her to sort of feel like she was sometimes just shuffling through life, like she couldn't really move that leg very well compared to her other one. But when I felt the sensation, or allowed the sensation to sort of come through myself, I felt just a tremendous, the most sickening, like slimy, most grotesque sensation. And it wasn't that there was anything like physically in front of me. It wasn't that I had like an image in my mind. It was just the sensation I got. And it was a sensation of just pure, mucky, like slimy, very dark and very very dark, very brought you down, very heavy energy. And I mean, if energy had a feeling or sensation, I would just say that was one of probably the worst feelings I have ever felt, where I felt physically ill for a moment. It got to the point where I even thought I had to step away from this session because I think I thought I had to go to the bathroom to feel sick. But the moment that I felt like it was maybe too much was when all of a sudden it just disappeared. All of a sudden, that yucky, very mucky, heavy energy was gone, as if it never existed. And that's probably, I would say that would have been the first time that I experienced a real attachment through someone else in a session. And I think to this day, I probably still haven't felt such a visceral reaction to just being in a session with someone else. This entity, I would call it an entity, because this energy was very, very strong. Very, very sickly, very heavy, very dark. The best way that I could probably explain or define what kind of image it was carrying was sort of like a very dark black slime that was just all of the most grotesque energies that you could possibly feel was just bundled up into this one energy, into this one entity. And it was fascinating because after we had done that session, she mentioned that her pain went away. She mentioned that after we had done that session and it had been removed from her physical form, she said her leg felt so much better. Like it's as if she never even had that pain there. And it's fascinating because, again, this was something that she had carried for a very long time, for about a decade or so. And the work that she does, she also has clients of her own. So, going and talking to her and asking her about her experiences with her clients, I was able to, actually, we came to the conclusion where we found that specifically one of her clients was having a lot of addictive issues. And a lot of the times, people that have addictions, they may carry a lot of entities and negative attachments because of the low vibration of whatever it is that they're addicted to. So entities, attachments, they come to us or they attach themselves to us because our energy is very low, and because they're low vibrational and they can't really sort of like roam around until they find sort of a host. They're kind of like parasites in a way. So they'll feed off of you energetically. And in the process, they cause you a lot of pain, a lot of hurt, but they do that because they want you to be in that negative state. They want you to continue to be in a low vibrational mode so that they can continue to survive. So she told me how specifically she did notice that there was this one client that she had for many years already, about a decade or so, and he was someone who was having a lot of issues with addiction. And even though he wasn't in the middle of a heavy addiction episode, he was prone to visiting a lot of places where there was a lot of negative energy and a lot of low vibrational energy. And somehow that entity had attached itself to that client. And because she was someone who closely worked with this client and they sort of had built kind of a very, trusting client practitioner relationship, somehow every time he would come to visit her, he would state how he would feel so much better and how he would feel sort of lighter in a way. And it's like, we don't notice it when somebody states these things, but in a way they're sort of telling us that they're feeling our energy. They're feeling what we're taking from them in a way. So a lot of the times, if you're someone who's highly sensitive, you will take a lot of negative energies from others because subconsciously you want to make other people feel better, right? So whether you're consciously aware of it or not, a lot of the times we will take what the other person is carrying and we would sort of put the heavy load on ourselves. But that's the thing, when that happens, we're taking away the experience from the person themselves. So it's like, even though we're doing something out of kindness, either consciously or subconsciously, it's in a way causing the main person that is carrying that entity or that attachment to not be able to experience what they need to experience with that entity, if that makes any sense. Because every experience in itself, either positive or negative, however we view it, it is an experience that our soul takes on to be able to have it, to know what it was like, to know what those emotions were, to be able to find out what it is that they had to do to clear themselves of that negative energy. So it's a responsibility that each soul takes on their own. But if someone comes over and takes it away from you, in a way, it's like they're robbing you of that experience, whether good or bad. It's an experience that needs to be sort of had by that soul. So that's where there's a dynamic that will happen where, someone who has good intentions does something good, or what they believe is good, and the person they did it for may not always be grateful for it, or may even become irritated with that person for doing that. And a lot of the time it's because it's like the soul is reacting in that way and sort of allowing the other person to know that they were being robbed of this experience. So with this client, again, that I had, she had mentioned that she had that client specifically that was very prone to addiction, and he was someone who frequented a lot of places where there was addiction present. And whenever there is a group of people that frequent an area that causes that area to become very heavy, very dense, with, a lot of their traumas or their woes or their sadness, a lot of negative energy that begins to accumulate in one space, then that's where it's very easy for someone, when they come through or come by, to end up taking a lot of that negative energy with them. So whether they're consciously aware of it or not, but they will take that negative energy with them. With my client, when we did that session, like she said, her pain went away completely. For the first week, I would say it was kind of like going away little by little, because when it comes to the physical point of our bodies, it takes some time for it to be completely gone. But she had said that she was feeling so much better, and by the end, I believe, of 2 weeks, she had no more pain, no more ache in that, no more heaviness in that leg. And ever since then, if I ever asked her about it, she said that she wouldn't even remember. Like, she didn't feel anything at all anymore. So whatever it is that we ended up doing in that session, I guess I sort of helped with my energy in a way to alleviate her energy, and we cleansed that space out. I did notice, though, because again, I was so very new to these entities and attachments, and I had felt that energy and the heaviness of it. I believe after the 2 weeks that she had completely felt that it was gone, I began to feel this ache in my hip, in my leg, and I just thought that it was just me. Like, oh, okay, well, maybe I need to be a little bit more conscious of doing my yoga practices, or, I was just making excuses for it, because again, I was so new to it. I wasn't aware that these attachments or entities had someplace they needed to go. And it got to the point where I started feeling also pretty achy in my leg as well. And it was just a small, like slow, gradual pain, I remember too, that started to happen, that it would feel like kind of achy and kind of tiring and kind of, I didn't know what it was, and I just thought it was because of the work I was doing and I wasn't taking care of myself as I should. So at one point I remember, I think it was maybe 3 or 4 months after. So when I had finally done a little bit more practice in these, working with entities and attachments, that's when I noticed that I finally linked, like, oh, this ache in my leg is for that reason. Whatever that entity was, it kind of hid itself in a way, like made itself a little bit smaller so that you weren't as consciously aware of it because it had already been found out. And then it transferred from her over to myself. I was able to, luckily, one of the sessions where I mainly focused on that ache and that pain that I was sensing, I was able to completely get rid of that pain as well. I was able to redirect it towards another space where it was able to leave me. And after that, like, I haven't felt that pain anymore. I used to have to like crack my leg a lot to try to like feel like a pressure, just alleviate the pressure. And when I finally was able to redirect that entity to another space where it could change, that's when I found relief. And like, I noticed, it took a span of a couple of weeks or months between like all of this chain, but looking back on it, like, okay, now I see what was happening with that client in that specific time. It was really like the most intense sensation I've had when it comes to experiencing an entity. So that's fascinating. And another example of an entity or attachment I would like to talk about is actually one where I was doing like a group hypnotherapy session. So years have passed since that first story. Now that more time has passed, I was more sure of myself and how I was able to work with clients and their energies and to help them to achieve whatever it is that they're looking for. So I was able to start doing group hypnotherapy sessions, just to have people feel and sense what it would be like to do this kind of practice if they didn't feel sure of doing it one-on-one yet. And I noticed that with my sessions, or with the group sessions, I was aware of a lot of information of the people around me, because I guess we were all practicing to get into that hypnoidal state. And again, the more you delve into like the theta wavelength, the delta, the beta, the alpha, the deeper you go into the wavelengths and you open up and you're more susceptible to hypnosis, to being in a deep state of hypnosis, I noticed that I was able to sort of gather more information with the people around me. And even though there could be like 5 people, 10 people in the room with me, depending on what it was that certain people needed, their messages would be like, either it would kind of come in like, kind of like in a line, when you're standing in line to get to the cash register. It was kind of like that, like depending on who needed some kind of attention first, or who needed like a certain message brought forward, they would kind of be like first in line, and then it would be the second, then the third, and the fourth, and it would kind of be like that in a way. So I noticed that with one of my very first group sessions, there was a woman specifically, I remember, and this group, I believe, how many people were there? There were about 4 or 5 of us in the room at that time. Yeah. And I noticed that there was this one woman specifically, and for some reason, in the rooms when I do group sessions, it's like I always tell people, to get comfortable wherever it is that they feel the most comfortable being, or it's either sitting or standing. I usually ask people to bring their mats or blankets, pillows, whatever it is that they feel comfortable. And depending on the space that I'm in, sometimes I'll also offer those things as well. So this space that I was working in, I remember it was a place where it was kind of kind of like a place where you could meditate. It was usually where group meditations were done. So it was a very tranquil, peaceful place. And there were about 4 or 5 of us, I believe. And one woman specifically, I noticed that she placed her mat right in front of me, like directly in front of me, like almost right where like I could probably, reach out and like touch her hand or something. So she had placed herself directly in front of me, and I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And before we started, because I thought not many people do that, and especially in group settings for some reason, not many people put themselves right at the forefront, And before we started, I had thought that's an interesting place, like position to put yourself, because I always believe that everything that's ever done, it's done for a reason and a purpose, and nothing is ever done by mistake. So I was aware of where she was placing herself, and she laid down and got very comfortable, and we had the other members as well in the room. And, everybody got comfortable. And I remember when we started that session, it was interesting because from the very start, the beginning, I remember feeling like kind of lightheaded in a way. Like this, we were just barely beginning the session, and I was already beginning to feel the effects. I was beginning to feel sort of lightheaded, sort of like unstable, not as balanced. And mind you, I was sitting at this point. And the more we went into the session, at one point I remember there was like this image that placed itself in my mind, where it kind of felt like a spiral. Like I saw a spiral, and it was just spinning. And I noticed that, I'm trying to focus on doing this session for everyone involved. But that image of the spiral was very, very prominent in my mind. And I noticed at some point, it's like I felt dizzy. It felt like I was on one of those spiraling rides that you see like at carnivals, like at fairs, things like that. One of those that just spin you round and round and round. And I felt like I was in one of those rides. And it got to the point where I felt tremendously dizzy, and my eyes were closed. But it felt like I was spinning in circles. I was just getting whipped around, and I had to open my eyes to refocus myself, because it was becoming a lot to where I thought, oh, I could probably get nauseous if I keep this up. So as soon as I started to feel that intensity, that's when I brought it up, because it's something that I couldn't ignore anymore. And I brought it up, like, oh, is anyone feeling, dizzy, or like they're being whipped around in circles? And the woman that was right in front of me, she said that's what she felt. She just raised her hand, like she wasn't, because when you get into like a deep state, you can ask questions, and a person will respond, either like waving their hand, or they'll say something verbally. A lot of the times, because you're such in a deep, relaxed state, you maybe don't want to verbalize what it is that you want to say. So when I saw her, she just lifted her hand up, and she was kind of just, saying that it was like her. And that's when, I saw that she was right in front of me, and I'm like thinking, oh, okay, well then I guess I'm feeling what she's feeling. And whatever it was that was attached to her, like I could feel itself sort of transferring over to myself. Because at some point, I guided her through this spiraling sensation, because she said herself that she was also feeling very dizzy. And after we were done and the session had ended and everybody was packing up to leave, I noticed that she was like staying behind. And, I went up to her and I asked her how she felt, how things were going on, because I told her my experience of what I felt, and if that's what she had been experiencing as well during the session. And she said yes, that was exactly what she was feeling. And I ended up finding out that this specific person actually came down from up north, and she was actually what is it called? Like a paramedic, but the ones that go on the helicopters. And And she said that she had had dizzy spells where it would get so intense to where like she wouldn't even be able to walk straight because she just feels like she would be whipped around all the time. And she was someone who, again, being a paramedic, she deals with a lot of traumatic experiences, a lot of traumatic moments where people are in very intense trauma, and the places that she frequents also. So she's in a very high emotional, intense job. And she, when she explained that to me, that's when I knew, like, oh, okay. So then it was just an accumulation of like the work that she's doing. She's, being lifted and flown from one place to another. And then she's also dealing with a lot of moments and experiences where there is a lot of low vibration, again, because it's trauma, accidents and emergencies, and it's her work. So she had many, many years where she felt like she was getting dizzy spells, and she would get herself checked out, but they wouldn't ever find anything physically wrong with her. And then, sometimes she would just have to take what she could to be able to deal with the episodes. And she says that over years, it was getting more and more intense. And it was just fascinating because it's like, I hadn't known anything about this person, nothing about their background. But from the moment she had placed herself right there, it's like I had already sort of connected in a way to energetically what it was that she was experiencing. So with her, it wasn't just one single entity that was attached. It was more so, it was an accumulation of attachments. And when they, come together, again, sometimes they cause your physical body to go through certain feelings and emotions. And it's like, what can you do when you're feeling all of these things and you're not even sure where it's coming from? We're not very much aware a lot of the times because we're not taught to be aware consciously or unconsciously of the energies around us. It's like a lot of the times we're taught to sort of ignore that part of ourselves that is, from the time we are born, we have that ability. Our senses are very heightened, very, very aware of around us, the people around us. But yet with time and age and experience, we forget in a way of what came naturally to us. We're taught to ignore the part of ourselves that is very much aware and in tune with the universe, the surroundings, the people, ourselves as well. And when we become detached from that, that's where we are getting a lot of these negative feelings and emotions and even physical aches and pains. It's really fascinating because we can change and heal and reprogram a lot of those energies or attachments. So I bring up these stories because I feel like they are examples of, it's like something that, that you just have to sort of live to be able to believe it in a way. And it just like goes to show that a lot of the time, whatever it is that you're feeling, we may try to sort of explain it away or not give it the attention that it deserves. And in the end, that ends up harming ourselves more than anything else. So I do bring up these stories of like what I've been able to sort of experience doing hypnotherapy. And there are so much more points to be able to bring up because, again, this isn't something that you hear very often. I don't think there is a lot of information out there in regards to hypnotherapy and what it can do to help us to bring light to it more than anything. So with how that, I mean, those aren't the only moments, to be honest, that I've had where attachments or entities have come up. But those were the two that I felt were like probably the most intense physically for me to experience it. Like other things I've had like sensations move through me. I've been able to, feel what the client's feeling without them needing to say it. But when it comes to such a visceral reaction, as I've had with those two instances, I was very taken aback because it was really incredible to be able to experience that, to experience what the other person was experiencing and at to what level they do. So to sort of view someone's experience through their eyes in a way, it is amazing because I've only known, what my perception is, what I've been able to experience and see or sense. And it's to be able to sort of be in the same, to be able to experience those moments with another person and to know that what you experience also, it is right because you were feeling it for someone else, and to have it in a way sort of confirmed, it's like it helps you to also be more attuned to your own intuition. And I think that's honestly something that we should all be striving to get back to, is it's to our consciousness, our intuition, get back to ourselves, or the part of ourselves that we believe we have forgotten, because nothing is ever forgotten. It's just maybe we've ignored it for a very long time. We've ignored ourselves. We've ignored what we feel, our intuition. And intuition is the part of ourselves that is attached to the universe, to source. It's something that is never wrong, to be honest. If we were to be aware of ourselves all of the time, in whatever situation we're in, if we paid attention 100% to our intuition, I promise you that every step that your intuition takes you down, it's always going to be the right step for you. Whereas if we listen to, other people who say that the other path is better for us, or who say, no, but this is more of a safe road to take, more than less likely, because you decided to ignore intuition, things are not going to turn out in the best way that you believed it could turn out. The more that you practice your intuition, listening and being aware, the more you are able and more sure to make your decisions, take your steps down whatever path you're led with a lot more certainty. So with that, I do want to thank you for visiting me for this episode, and I hope that I see you on the next one. So Eye of the Beholder is done every Tuesday. I upload a video, and if you wish to help out the channel, I do have a Patreon where you can become a member. And the fun thing with the Patreon is that every week we do a group hypnotherapy session together. It's all online. And if you feel like you would also like to purchase a Flower of Life t-shirt, I actually make these t-shirts available online. I do have a storefront, which I will have a link down below, so you'll be able to purchase them. It's a regular unisex t-shirt. I have it in white and black, but I did shape it to how I wanted to form it, but it is available. It's the Flower of Life. I do a lot of sacred geometry on my channel, on my website, because I do believe that the sacred geometry, it allows our conscious mind to be able to open up and to connect with source, with ourselves, with higher consciousness, being able to balance us. Depending on the design, each one means something differently. This one is the Flower of Life. So as you can tell, it has like little sort of like flower shapes, but in reality it's actually just circles, like circle after circle after circle in a circle. So this is supposed to represent the connectedness of like community of ourselves with source. And also feel free to follow me on all my social media. That will also be linked down below. And if you would like to have a one-on-one session as well, a hypnotherapy one-on-one session, I have those available on my calendar in my website, which I will have linked down below as well. So again, I do thank you for visiting me on this episode of Eye of the Beholder, and I do hope to see you next week, next Tuesday. Have a great week.